Well, I got a couple of things. Do you have anything? Or
Uh, well, I started watching this TV series, reality show called King of the Nerds. The show itself, most of it's pretty decent. We watched. There's only 8 episodes for the first season. The premise. I mean, I'm not a big reality show fan, especially like these competitions, because they're. I mean, they're set up for the stronger players to always fail because it's always that like voting situation. So they always want to try to eliminate the strongest first, and usually it happens. So by the time you get to the end of the show, it's like people that you just like,
don't give a shit
yeah, don't
about.
give a shit about, or like they really aren't the strongest people. And the show was basically the same way too. The premise is that they take guys that are supposed to be like nerds in their type of field. Like they had a video game blogger, a pro gamer, uh, Dungeons and Dragon guy. They had a mathematician, uh, some scientists. They had a girl from NASA. So they had all these, I guess supposed to be nerd types, and it was hosted by Curtis Armstrong, Booger from Revenge of the Nerds,
Sweet.
and Robert Carradine, who is the main star of Revenge of the Nerds, one of the Carradine brothers. He was hosting it too. Uh, those guys are actually pretty funny. They're a little back and forth between them. It's surprising how sharp those two guys are because they're like easily close to 60 years old now.
Mm.
Um, but my main issue is that it was the same thing where they ended up voting like this guy named Hendrix. I forgot what his specialty was, but he was actually like a true nerd. Like he was a brainiac, totally awkward, socially when he's interacting with people.
Right.
And they voted to put him in this basically a nerd off competition at the end against I forgot who it was in the first episode, but it was against basically a really smart guy versus another smart guy. So either way, they were going to win. One of the stronger guys were going to be gone, and he got kicked off the show. And I'm like, he was one of the more interesting guys. Like I wanted to see him go through this competition because there was also this girl. She claimed to be a Batman expert and comic book expert, but when it came to like they did some comic book challenges, she didn't know shit. Like she was like exposed.
Oh man.
Like, and it wasn't even some of the like crazy questions that you could come up with comic books. So that really made me upset. But then also the idea of the nerd. I don't know if we talked about it on the show. I just feel like it's been commercialized for sure. Like it's
Oh
been turned
yeah.
into its
Yeah,
own little
absolutely.
that the nerd like being a video gamer doesn't make you a nerd. A nerd can be a gamer, and like just to me, this is how I define a nerd is somebody that's intellectually really smart. I mean, it might be intellectually smart in one area, but it's like usually it's some kind of academia. Like to me, that is definitely like the prereq for me to put you in the nerd category.
Yeah.
Then you have to have some kind of like side thing, like I don't know, like I say, like it's video games or it's comic books or it's Dungeons and Dragons. It's just something like you're just totally obsessed with that's sort of counterculture or just like your own. It doesn't have to be counterculture, but it's just like this thing that you're really into. You have to have those two things, and I think what we see nowadays is like oh, I'm into comic books. That makes me a nerd. No, it doesn't. This is not a nerd. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to go through also like this. I think school like being sort of outcast or not being able to fit in goes into that nerd thing
Well,
too.
Outcast is a huge part of it. I forget. I saw a video on it. It might have been like Tosh Point oh or so, I forget where the hell I saw it, but it's basically this like big awkward guy comes out with glasses and he's like super awkward and he's like, um, really attractive women who put on a pair of glasses and call themselves a nerd. Please stop doing that. Really attractive men who do the same thing. Stop doing that
Yeah.
because it's actually pretty horrible to be a nerd. This is what a nerd looks like. It's someone who wasn't great at talking, was socially awkward, and he's like, he's like, you know, but I mean, he was making light, but he's like, I am a nerd. You're not. If you put on a pair of glasses and have watched a couple Marvel films, you're not a nerd. I even took one of those stupid tests, and it says like, are you a nerd, geek, or a dork?
I consider myself a dork. Like,
A dork.
yeah, I don't accept. I don't fit the one requirement of being like academic. Like I do fine academically, but I don't. But not like that. Like MIT or
Yeah.
like really highly intelligent level.
Well,
Yeah.
this I don't know how they're properly designed because this was some fucking bullshit online thing. But they
But
defined
those are serious tests you're taking.
they defined a geek as someone who is extremely interested in one thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have academic prowess. Nerd, they defined as someone who had extreme academic prowess, but could also have a focus of interest.
Yeah.
And then the dork, I think, was just more about like the socially awkward and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I always saw more the dork. Like I have certain interests that I can become obsessed over, and maybe at times when I was into them wasn't like the big mainstream thing to do. Like I think the biggest dorky thing is that not only did I collect baseball cards and basketball cards up until like I probably shouldn't have,
Yeah.
but I didn't collect them just because like this one's valuable. I would collect them and I would like become obsessed with looking at the stats and like and trying to project my. I wasn't jerking off. I wasn't jerking.
Faces.
I wasn't doing that. But it was like trying to project, okay, what is this player going to be doing in a couple of years now, looking at his stats, where's he going? And also,
And you don't play fucking fantasy baseball, dude.
dude, this is why there was no fantasy base. Like,
Well,
like,
that's what
you
you should
guys
do
are talking
now.
jock stuff anyway. I mean, you're
but it was obsessing over numbers, though. Like, I was more worried about the
you're-
numbers. And
you're
like,
freaking you did 3 tours. How are you? You're more jock than dork, I think.
no, I definitely wouldn't. I mean, I'm fat. How does that fit into the jock thing?
Jocks always get fat at some point, pretty much.
I feel my physical prowess, like when I was at the peak of my game, only lasted probably a couple of years, and I was like 21, and that's just because I finally grew into my body, and then
That's
I
like
kept
Al
growing
Bundy.
and growing. No, I wasn't. I never played like high school sports.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I like to play basketball on the playground or with my friends, but was never competed, scholastically on a team. So yeah, so I always considered myself more of a dork. I mean, I did have a lot of the social awkwardness too, like especially in high school. After my freshman year of going like to eat lunch in the cafeteria, and just got tired of like all the clickiness and stuff, I would just go from like fresh or sophomore year to my senior year. I'd go and either eat real quick in the lunchroom, and then go to the library, or I'd actually just skip lunch totally and just spend it in the library, reading magazines and books. I just
You are a real dork. Are you sure
I
you're not
was-
a geek too?
I don't know. I don't know. I was more concentrated on the definition of nerd because it's become such a.
It's been hijacked.
Yeah, definitely hijacked.
Because it's so. I mean, you look at any. Like, I don't want to use the term. Honestly, look at anyone who's fashionable, and they have, no offense, but they have the black frame glasses or whatever.
I'd like to
That's
say that I've
fine.
been doing this for a long time. I got pictures to prove how long I've been
No,
doing
I
it.
mean, I'm not. Yeah, but I mean, it's but a lot of really attractive women wear the thick black frame glasses, and they're doing it purely. It's affectation, and a lot of these people are doing it. I have friends who do it. They're not prescription glasses. It's purely affectation. It's
Aesthetic.
they're like aesthetic. Like they.
Well, in my mind, I was trying to go back and figure out when did this happen? What were like the events that sort of changed this? The one thing that I definitely think that caused this was Steve Jobs and Bill Gates sort of becoming really prominent.
Billionaires?
Well, billionaires,
Nerd billionaires.
Yeah.
successful,
Yeah, exactly.
really successful people that became the face of these huge
Well,
companies.
I think it has to do with the fact that the things that they were nerdy at are now the things that
Everybody
people
uses.
loves and
Yeah.
uses constantly. You can't live without.
That was, I think, one of the things that turned, like, oh, being a nerd's cool because it's related to being successful now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is true, and I think that in a way, as lame as it is, that it's more of a fashion statement. It is good in a sense where maybe it's somehow there'll be some residual push towards science and math and things like that, or people learning technology.
Or you just get a whole culture of fucking wannabes fucking faking their ways through stuff.
Or faking. There's plenty of fake intellectual. I mean, whatever.
Well,
I
you'd
get be
like to
accused of that.
It's almost like, to me, it's almost
pseudo
like
intellectual. I
it's
probably am.
It's almost like the that game where you can play guitar Guitar Hero, where it
Rock band.
became so popular. People were like, oh, I play Guitar Hero. I'm like a guitar rock star now.
And
It's
you're
like, no,
like,
you're not. You have no
yeah.
fucking musical ability at all. You're pushing a couple
It's
buttons in
karaoke.
rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just like,
Well, I mean, I think if anything, I would hope what is happening is that like the nerds in school, like, are probably hopefully are treated better. I mean, hopefully it's not like the same culture where like you get, I mean, I'm sure it still
Well,
happens.
you know
You
what
get
it
bullied,
is?
but
I think they're treated probably like shit, or if not exactly the same. And it's because the nerd aspect has switched towards fashion and really has nothing to do with their personalities. So if someone is socially awkward and they're a bit of a misfit, and I totally was that person, I was too shy to even talk to people. There absolutely be, what's the term? Not minimized, but let's separate it from the pack, whatever. And so I think I'd like to think that there's like a tolerance for people who are socially awkward.
and I think that occurs later in life too. Because when you're in grade school and stuff like that, like you said, if you're an outcast, you're still gonna get picked on, no matter if you're smart or not. It's not till you get till
it's
like your
college.
late 20, college, where it's like,
I think college is where it's, to me, I mean, I think that's where it would start turning because, well, one thing, you sort of get to start over
yeah,
with, not only with yourself,
that's
but
exactly what
you're
I
also
did,
with a lot. I mean, the college sort of weeds out some of those guys, obviously.
yeah.
So you're dealing with a different intelligence level, a different. So
you're paying money to be there. It's a very different thing. You're taking a class, and then it's not required that you socially interact with anyone unless you're answering questions in a group or something. So you can go in and go out, and the name of the game is to get the best GPA. And
there's a greater
Hottest
chance.
chicks. What? Oh,
Was-
sorry. I was paying attention.
There's a greater chance also that you're going to meet somebody that you're compatible with. I think like people that you get along.
Yeah.
Because if you're coming
you
from a
kinda-
small town,
You can kind of choose your friends, is what I was gonna say. In
Yeah.
college, you can have your own new clique, and
yeah, I mean you got a chance to restart. But also, you're leaving a lot of them are leaving smaller towns where they might have been basically the smartest person in their school. Now where they're going to college, where there's a lot of himself and a better
Yeah.
chance to maybe make a social connection.
totally makes sense.
So that show is kind of shitty.
I mean, I enjoyed it enough that I finished it. Just even seeing Booger and the other guy from Revenge of the Nerds, they have funny segments. Some of the trivia, I mean, it's fun trying to guess some of the stuff, some of the questions, and seeing them do these different challenges. And there's this guy named Virgil who lasted quite a, he lasted I think like till episode 5, so he got close to the finals, and he represented, I think, what a true nerd was. So I'm glad that at least one guy I thought was a true nerd, made it pretty deep into the game.
Well, some of that stuff is really nice. But the person from NASA, like, I don't know. Maybe she was a nerd, but the truth is about NASA, they're basically super people because they're usually
We're talking about
the
astronauts.
smartest people in the world. Yeah, I am talking about astronauts, but also
Because there's
they
lots
have
of people that work for
the
NASA
best
that's not the
engineers.
What is so funny is that she claimed, she worked at NASA, and I forgot what exactly her title was. But they did
Janitor?
a physics challenge. Well, the way that she did on this challenge, they did a physics challenge where they took different balls that weigh different amounts and dropped them through planes of glass, and they had to guess exactly, or I mean, they're supposed to do calculations and how many panes of glass the ball would actually penetrate. And they had 3 different setups, and she got, I think, all of them wrong. She missed every one of them. It was
Well, I
the
guess
video game blogger that got the most right. She won the challenge.
That's crazy. I mean, they have different skills. Like you were saying, you have engineers who probably. There could be an engineer who deals only with robotics, and they wouldn't necessarily. They should.
Yeah,
actually, they should.
I think she said she was a physicist, so I mean, it makes you wonder, like,
That's
okay,
crazy. Yeah.
why were your calculations like that off?
Why were you the worst?
It's like, well, I'm a conservative. I was.
It's
being
also the situation that they're in too. Some people just don't
Right.
Well, she
don't do
seemed
good under pressure.
Under pressure, yeah.
I mean, she was from NASA. She was a physicist, but you would not think that she would fit the typical nerd. I mean, because a lot of them were drinking out there, which is totally fine. But the way that she was acting and partying and like talking about wanting to have sex with people, and it's like, okay, you probably, I mean, you've probably never gone through that awkwardness of being.
It could just be 100% bullshit. You
Could be
do
She said
bullshit,
well, she
too.
graduated
That's
high school at
reality
16,
TV.
and yeah, I mean,
It's still reality TV, so it could be so much of that stuff is just fucking made up.
but I had one of the girls. This is the only reason why I watched the show, because another podcast I was listening to, she came on the episode and she was talking about the show, and she's like, "This is the close," and this is after the series is already over. She's like, "This is, I think, like, it's like this is my only experience with the reality TV show, but I feel like this is the closest to being reality than any of the other shows are, because." So there wasn't none of the scripted parts. They like when we finished a challenge, whatever they'd grab us, throw us in the green room to talk about stuff. Like there wasn't like okay, let's try to recreate the incident that just happened and you talk about it. So I mean,
well, the person that's bullshitting would be the first person to do that too. That, in my opinion.
well, I mean, yeah, I guess
the first person to say that anyway.
Did you hear about that guy from? This is totally unrelated, but there was a guy who was basically like a cameraman for Fox News, who faked being part of one of these mass shootings, and he was a cameraman for Fox News. They're like, we can't get a witness, so he goes in front of the camera. I was in the shooting. It was horrible. I barely got out alive. Blah blah blah. And someone said, "Holy shit, that's the same guy who was at Ground Zero and did a 9/11." And they went back and they showed the video. It was like, "Oh, I barely got alive," and it was a Fox News cameraman, and they couldn't get a proper witness, so he just.
That's crazy.
It's fucking crazy, right?
Fucking lunacy.
Yeah. Anyway, but I guess that just goes to. I mean, some of the.
yeah.
Just there's so much bullshit out there. It's hard to tell what's really real.
Yeah, the ratings and advertisement game. You gotta try to make some
Yeah, you gotta make
entertaining
it
TV.
interesting, right?
Yeah.